Hey there. So this week I'm going to be talking about a lot of the changes that I've made in my personal life and why. I spoke about this a couple weeks ago on the podcast, and trust me, these episodes are always the hardest to do, to like open up and be vulnerable and to, share what I've changed and why. And it's like, you just find something that works for a while, and then it's inevitable that you're likely going to have to change things up at some point. And like I said, it's hard for me to kind of look at my own health and say, okay, like this was optimized for a while, but now it's not. So, like I said, it's hard to just put this out there, but at the same time, I want to be transparent about what's going on and, health situations that I'm dealing with. And I know sometimes people think, "Oh, I don't even think of myself as an influencer. I think of myself as an educator." But people with platforms who are bringing guests on and kind of, teaching others how to heal and be healthier and have a large following, sometimes people think that they're perfect, their health is perfect, that they don't, struggle with anything. And you never eat foods that are less than ideal, especially when you're a dietitian. Like, I deal with that all the time. And it's just kind of funny. My son, who is almost 16, our only child who's left in our house full time, my other two are away at college, soon to return. But his friend, he's this one quote unquote friend who always makes fun of him for he makes comments like, "Oh, well, I'm sure your mom just makes you eat so many vegetables at home, and you're probably a vegan and your whole family is vegan." And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, that's just the perception that people have." And I'm far from from vegan. I was vegan for 6 weeks when I was in my 30s, and I couldn't handle it. So anyway, yeah, we definitely eat meat-based, high protein, as you know, but it's just funny how, people perceive that, I have it all figured out all the time. And yes, I know a lot about metabolic health, but I've been learning about so many new concepts and things that have been missing, in what I teach and how people are healing. So I wanted to be upfront and transparent about what's going on. So if you follow me on social media or you listen to the episode a couple of weeks ago, you know that I am dealing with pretty severe adrenal fatigue to the point of adrenal exhaustion. And I know this because of symptoms that I've felt and also testing. So I did a 4-point cortisol panel, and because the adrenal gland releases cortisol, and your cortisol should spike around, I shouldn't say spike, it should start to increase around 6 o'clock in the morning for most people. And then around midday is where it kind of peaks, which is good because you want to be awake, you want to be alert. This is the hormone that gets you up. It's the stress hormone also. So when you're stressed out, more of it's released, but so that you can be alert and do, have that fight or flight response so that you can get yourself out of stressful situations. And then it should start to diminish over the course of the afternoon, and then lower levels at night. And people can get very out of balance cortisol responses. They can, get to the point where they're very high at night because they're overstimulated, they're not going to bed on time, they're staring at blue light and screens. This is very, very, very common in today's society because blue light stimulates cortisol production. And that's not the case with me, but many people, that's, kind of how it starts. And then as the adrenal fatigue starts to get prolonged, then that's where it turns to adrenal exhaustion. And some people think a lot of times that it's the adrenal gland like overproducing and that it just gets tired. And that's not necessarily true. It's the messaging on the HPA axis, the hypothalamus pituitary axis, where the signaling from the pituitary down to the adrenal gland is off. It's out of balance. And it's the circadian rhythm and the lighting environment that plays a huge role with this. And yes, nutrition and stressful situations, eating crappy nutrition, which creates stress in the body. All of those things come into play, but the lighting environment is huge. So anyway, I've been dealing with adrenal exhaustion. I had mine checked, and my cortisol pattern had basically flatlined during the day. So I wasn't getting that nice rise in the afternoon. It was just kind of low all day. And that's a sign that it's gone on a long time. So what's interesting about this is that I never really felt that fatigued. I don't know if it's my lifestyle or that, I have kept myself in shape and I eat well. And I do sleep well most of the time, so I don't know if that was enough to just, keep me at least energized, because I never felt like I couldn't get out of bed. Like a lot of times people feel that with adrenal fatigue and exhaustion because they don't have the cortisol to get them up and rolling. But what was happening with me was that I was having high blood sugars in the morning. So you get that, increase in cortisol, the dawn effect around 6 o'clock in the morning. And mine was staying high and creeping higher, higher, higher as I was fasting throughout the morning. And so that cortisol causes the body to release glucose into the bloodstream, again, to deal with whatever stressor it is. And so I saw my blood sugars increase, and this started happening. I know it started happening last summer for sure, summer of 2023. It probably was even before that, but I did wear a glucose monitor in 2022 that summer a couple different times, and my blood sugars were very normal at that time, and even my morning blood sugar was normal. So, as I've talked about a lot on the podcast, my mom got diagnosed with stage 4 cancer last July, and then, started chemo the end of August, mid-August, end of August, somewhere in there, and then did chemo treatments throughout the fall and into the winter, and just did not handle it well. I was taking her to a lot of appointments, and that was very stressful. And so that just exacerbated things, I believe, through no fault of her own. She certainly didn't want to be a stressor to me. But anyway, then she went into hospice in January and was there for a whole month. So I was, driving to be with her, staying overnight a lot of the time in the hospice suite. Thankfully, I was able to be with her. I was her power of attorney. So there's just a lot going on that month. And then she passed away, and I do have two sisters. My older sister is definitely dealing with adrenal dysfunction as well. But I did all the planning for the memorial and everything that came along with that. So I have been through a lot of stress, and unfortunately now, my dad is still alive and he's not in good health. And I've never really talked about my dad too much on the podcast. Men are just a lot more introverted, or at least my dad is. He doesn't really talk about his health a whole lot. He doesn't talk about much of anything, his feelings or anything, but he's going through a hard time since my mom passed, and he is living on his own. But he had a massive heart attack in July of 2019. So he's coming up on 5 years. And what they found was 90% blockage, and that if he underwent coronary bypass surgery, he likely wouldn't make it through surgery. So he opted not to have the surgery. And, he's just been living with 90% blockage in his arteries ever since. And so he gets very winded very easily. As you can imagine, he's got congestive heart failure. He gets swelling in his legs and feet. He's got heart palpitations. He's got sleep apnea. He's just kind of a medical mess. And high blood pressure. He's on medications for a lot of that. He doesn't believe in the treating the root cause. He's just pop a pill for this and take a pill for that kind of guy. And just, despite me trying to educate him. So it is what it is. But anyway, just kind of dealing with that and trying to keep him independent. And his health issues have been exacerbating. He's lost a lot of weight since January when my mom went into hospice. Isn't eating well. I recently had, signed him up for mobile meals. And so, and there's just a barrage of doctor appointments coming up. So, yeah, I mean, I would say there's a lot going on behind the scenes. And, it's like there always is, right? It's like I know I'm always like happy go lucky on the podcast and on social, but there's always things going on with people that we don't know about. So, little side note, just give people grace and know that people aren't perfect. They don't eat perfectly. They struggle with their own issues. And, a lot of this is consequence of what's been going on in my life for the last year, but it goes beyond that as well. It's like I'm a mom of 3 kids and they were super busy and I was sleep deprived for many years and I was run here, run there and, color coded calendar and, never a dull moment. And I wouldn't change anything for any of that. But I'm just saying, like, we've had a fast paced lifestyle for 20 years and almost to the point where it's addicting to have that fast-paced lifestyle and never a dull moment. And it's like, I don't know how to sit and do, just sit and be. So that's something that I'm definitely working on to treat my adrenal exhaustion. But a lot of it is the lighting environment and getting my circadian rhythm back in balance and, taking light breaks, blocking blue light at the end of the night so that cortisol pattern can come back into a regular, regulated pattern that is optimal. And so lighting plays a huge role with that. And I'll do more podcasts on that. But it's I feel like this lighting component has been a huge, a piece that I've missed in my courses and working with my community for the whole time, up until the last couple of months. So I know I've gotten some backlash from my community. Not many people. I mean, the vast majority of people are like, oh my gosh, I'm having high blood sugars in the morning too, or I have adrenal fatigue, or I have adrenal exhaustion, and I don't know how to fix it. The vast majority of people are so supportive, but you always get those people like, oh my gosh, I thought you said, you can't eat breakfast or you change your protocol all the time. I don't even know if I should listen to you. And, I don't even know, like you're all over the place. I knew I would get some of that. And that's what's hard about being transparent about what you're doing. Like, I don't know everything. I'm always learning. I have one of those brains that never shuts off. That's another reason I got to adrenal exhaustion, but like I just don't know how to shut my brain off. And so believe me, it was really hard for me to admit that my blood sugars were going up because here I am, the blood sugar insulin resistance lady, and I don't know why mine were creeping up and high in the morning, and now I do know. But it's taken a lot of peeling back layers and learning new information. And I recently took a course by Carrie Bennett. She's a quantum educator, quantum health educator, and she has a podcast along with Sarah Kleiner. I think it's called Quantum Conversations. And I took her adrenal fatigue, adrenal quantum course and learned a lot. Like there are many things in there that I already knew, especially the nutrition stuff, but treating the nervous system and treating, optimizing our exclusion zone water, which again, we haven't talked about on the podcast. And that was a new concept for me. I'm like, what in the heck is exclusion zone water? And we talked about it a little bit in my interview with Dr. Tom Cowan, a couple of weeks ago, but we didn't really go into depth. And so that is another thing I'm working on that we'll be talking more and more about, and will be in my new course to treat adrenal fatigue. And, I'm really, really working on the lighting environment and syncing up my circadian rhythm. And it's not easy. I mean, it is easy. They're easy concepts, and most of the concepts that I teach are easy and simple to understand. They're not always easy to implement. because we have our lifestyle how we have it. And today's society is just so far removed from what does heal adrenal fatigue and true adrenal exhaustion. And it's really just getting back to nature and, living like a human should live. But her course has helped me immensely. And so I'm just going to kind of run down some things that I'm working on and doing. And, hopefully you can implement too. So, of course, there's the lighting piece and getting up and watching sunrise whenever I can. That is such a huge part of setting the circadian rhythm, because that light in your eyes is going to stimulate that cortisol production that you want high in the morning. You don't want high at night. So you do want cortisol high at certain parts of the day, or higher. You just don't want it high all the time. And so getting out into the sunlight can help with the cortisol production if it's kind of flatlined like mine has, or if you have kind of an over exaggerated, really high cortisol response. And this is where my daughter's been for the last couple of years. Going out to watch the sunrise can, you want a bump up in cortisol, but it can calm it so it's not so high. And so that natural light kind of is an indication to do so. And then the mid-morning, it's not always mid-morning, it's usually a couple hours after sunrise, the UVA rise, where the sun is 10 to 30 degrees in the sky, that's called UVA rise. And that's where a lot of the neurotransmitters are prompted to be made. So things like serotonin, especially, and other hormones and neurotransmitter, the body says, okay, let's make these hormones, let's make these neurotransmitters, let's increase this at all from our lighting environment. So if you can get out into the UVA rise, and I would encourage you to download an app called Circadian that tells you when all of these things are happening where you live. That will help you to produce the serotonin at that time of the day. So later, the serotonin, it's kind of like stored in your body. It's then converted to melatonin later in the day so that you can sleep and repair. And melatonin is the body's biggest antioxidant and keeps you healthy and heals you. So you can see how if you don't have your light environment optimized and you're not getting outside at certain parts of the day, your sleep, like even the morning light environment, plays a huge role in how you're going to sleep later in the day. So it's really important. But that's going to turn into melatonin and help you sleep and repair and stay healthy and keep your immune system healthy. And then the UVB rise is like that midday sun. That is where you like get your tan from, right? And the UVB is important because that is needed to, to strike your skin and create vitamin D. And I'll get an expert on here to talk about vitamin D as well, but vitamin D supplementation is not the same as manufacturing it through the skin. So if you get outside during that UVB time, that helps you produce vitamin D, which is another very, very potent antioxidant for the body that keeps you well and does so many things in your body. So if you have low levels of vitamin D, you're not going to feel well. Your immune system's going to be faulty. And so right now, it's May, and we can start absorbing, at least me in Wisconsin, I can start absorbing UVB. It's not always even available in Wisconsin. For many months, it's not available. So what your body does is stores up vitamin D during this time. So then when you're not exposed to UVB, so I don't get UVB for many months here, your body has stored vitamin D that it can use throughout the winter. And vitamin D is very readily absorbed right now in the northern hemisphere. And then melatonin kind of takes over in the winter months. So I don't want to get too far into that, but that's why I'm working so much on my lighting environment so that I can calm my cortisol when it shouldn't like skyrocket, but bring it up when it should come up. And so much of that is dictated by your lighting. And then the sun set or those later sunset, when you're watching more red light, and the infrared and the near infrared is very I shouldn't even say visible because we can't see all of these lights, but it's there, it's present in the evening. And that red light, that type of light at sunset triggers the body to say, okay, now we calm our cortisol down and we increase melatonin. And that helps you sleep and rest and heal. And if you're staring at red or blue light through your phone, through your tablet, through your TV, and you're not blocking it with blue light blocking glasses and you're staring at it till you go to bed, 10, 11, 12 o'clock, you're stimulating cortisol with that blue light, and then you're not sleeping. You need about 4 hours of darkness for melatonin to peak. So say you get off your screens and you go to bed at 10, that melatonin's not going to peak until 2 a.m., which is quite natural. But if you are on screens and you're, up watching TV till 1 a.m. or 2 a.m., that melatonin peaks 4 hours later. So 5 a.m., 6 a.m., you are not going to want to get up and get going because your melatonin is peaking when cortisol should be starting to rise. So hopefully that makes sense. Anyway, I don't want to get too far into all of that today, but I'm just trying to help you understand where I'm coming from. And so I'm really working on my cortisol and melatonin pattern, because if my cortisol was off, chances are I didn't have my melatonin tested, but chances are that was not optimized either, because it's like when one's high, the other should be low, and when one's low, the other should be high. So that's kind of where I'm at with my lighting environment. But I do want to talk about my eating patterns too, because that's what is getting people up in arms a lot. And it's kind of crazy because it's like, well, I'm not asking you to do what I'm doing. But at the same time, I know a lot of people see what I'm doing and they think they should do the exact same thing. And I've told you from the get-go, like, everybody's protocol should be different. You don't need to do exactly what I do or, eat what I eat, because that's for me. But for me right now, trying to get my cortisol regulated and my circadian rhythm back in balance, it's important for me to eat earlier, because food is a secondary circadian signal. Okay. So the sunlight and the light environment is huge. That's like the primary signal. The light comes into your eyes, and those light messages tell the cells in the body and the organs what to do. And then eating is a secondary. So if I get up and watch the sunrise and I can eat a high protein, higher fat breakfast within an hour, 30 to 60 minutes of sunrise, that is telling my body further that it's time to, like, wake up and start getting everything going, and the digestive organs going, and start priming the body for the whole day. And so it's important, and that calms cortisol is what, like a big cortisol spike. You don't want a huge cortisol spike. You want some in the morning, you don't want a huge cortisol spike. And so when you eat in the morning, it's just kind of the secondary signal to your body, like, okay, I'm nourished, I'm fed, I'm safe. I don't have to keep putting out cortisol as a stress response because, my blood sugar is falling, or, I'm like super hungry. And this is new for me. So I went about 5 years without hardly ever eating. I started to eat around 10 or 11 the last several months. But before that, it was a noon, 1, 2, sometimes even. And that was way too late for me personally, especially because I'm a very, I'm an early morning. I don't even want to say I'm an early riser anymore. I just like have, your circadian rhythm dictates when you're going to wake up. So anyway, I'm trying to eat within 30 to 60 minutes of the sunrise. Doesn't always happen. Right now, we're getting into really long days, which I love, but the sun is coming up at like 5:40 a.m. And most days I'm out there to see it, because I feel rested. I'm usually awake by about 5:15, 5:20. I got my sleep, and it's not like I'm dragging to get out, but even if I'm hungry, it's hard to get that breakfast at like 6 or 6:30, getting my son to school. It's like we all have these excuses. So sometimes it's more like 8 o'clock before I'm eating, but it's still far earlier and I'm still working on that because with these really long days, I have been finding it hard to get that breakfast within 30 to 60 minutes, but it's a work in progress. And at first, I couldn't handle a lot of food at early in the morning because my body wasn't used to it. I've always been one of those people who's hungry in the morning, and I used to always eat breakfast before I started intermittent fasting. But I would also eat until I went to bed, have snacks. So that's where my insulin resistance came, and I used to eat far more grains and carbohydrates than I do now. But getting a high protein, high fat, or at least some fat, staying close to 0 carbs. I usually will have, if I'm gonna have some carbs, I might have some berries, but I'm usually under 15, 20 grams of carbs for sure in that first meal. That stabilizes that blood sugar, and I've talked about that forever on this podcast, like a high protein with some fat. Staying close to 0 carbs is gonna stabilize the blood sugar and prevent you from getting a blood sugar spike. And if you can stabilize with that first meal, you typically have less of a blood sugar spikes even throughout the day. So I'm trying to get at least 30 grams of protein, 25 to 30 grams of protein in that meal. And I've finally gotten to the point where I feel like I can eat, a good sized meal. And as of late, when I eat at 8, I'm recording this podcast around 2 o'clock and I'm hungry, like I'm just getting hungry as I'm sitting here recording this. So it's been 6 hours and I ate 3 eggs and some venison and some berries, and that held me for 6 hours. And now after I'm done recording, I'm gonna go and eat a nice big lunch. And I probably won't eat dinner because, it's gonna be 3 o'clock by the time I eat and I won't be hungry. But if I do, it will be small because I don't want to eat a lot of food before bed. So that's what's kind of working for me. If I am eating a smaller breakfast where I can't sit down and actually make myself some eggs and whatever, I'll just eat like a beef stick, a Chomp's beef stick, and like a string cheese, which is only about 15 grams of protein. And then I'm hungry more like at 10 or 11. And then I'll eat 3 times, but I'm still never snacking. I'm not drinking anything with calories or sugar in between because that would lead to you know, insulin resistance again. And I don't want, I don't want to develop that again. So that's kind of where I'm at with eating. And then that second meal, I will have more carbs, but my threshold seems to be around 30, 40 grams of carb. And if I go above that, I tend to get a spike. But I'm still like over the course of the day, I'm under 100 grams of carb typically. That's what works well for me. I'm 48, I'm perimenopause. I don't have insulin resistance anymore, but uh, I'm not as metabolically flexible probably as I was, in my teens or 20s. So hormonally things are changing. So that's kind of what's working for me. And like I said, my energy has been good, but it's really good with the changes that I've made. And so most days, I'm still getting anywhere between 14 and 18 hours of fasting. I don't sweat it, if it's 13, 14 hours, that I roll with it. But I am usually getting at least 14 hours of fasting because I do not like to eat past like 5 or 6 PM for sure. And I do the best eating somewhere between 2 and 4, but I know that that's not always great for people with families. So that's just kind of what's working for me right now. And then I was still struggling with some bloating, not nearly like I had when I ate a lot of carbs and grains, but I was getting some bloating. And I had been tinkering with experimenting with enzymes, and I added enzymes in and I added in betaine HCl because I thought I probably had some low stomach acid because this was happening when I ate high protein meals. And so betaine HCl helps to lower the acidity in the stomach so that you can digest protein better. That's a whole thing that I go through in my new course with the digestion, but the addition of those two things has pretty much taken away all bloating, and I feel so much better with those things. So that's another change that I made. Exercise wise, I'm still pretty much the same. I mainly walk. most days. That really differs, um, depending on what I have going on, but it's pretty much always in the morning. And then, if you do download the circadian app, if you can walk or get some exercise outside during that UVA rise, that really kind of gives you a boost of energy. And then that's when you want to be outside to trigger all of the neurotransmitters, the serotonin and the production, all I can't even remember all that goes on during that time, but it's a lot. So get yourself outside if at all possible. Take a 15-minute walk, 20-minute walk. And then I am strength training once or twice a week still. I was I just didn't want to give that up. I couldn't. Like I just felt like again, my energy level was good. Um, and I felt like I would get like sad if I gave that up because I've been doing it for so many years. So what I did instead was I was going to a 5:30 a.m. class on Mondays and Fridays under the harsh lights, under the fluorescent lights. I wasn't watching the sunrise on those days, and I was just going into a gym with these huge fluorescent lights. And so what I've done instead is I've moved to going to the 8:30 a.m. class when I can. There's still times where I need to go at 5:30, but I wear like clear or my yellow tone blue light blocking glasses for at least a little bit of, less harshness with the artificial lighting. Um, and I go to 8:30 whenever possible. I know that's not always feasible for everybody, but I've moved my schedule around so that I can prioritize that because one, I wasn't getting as much sleep because I would be like, oh, is it 5 o'clock yet? Is it 5 o'clock yet? Like I was anticipating having to get up, so I wasn't sleeping as well. And the fluorescent lighting, there's a couple different reasons why I changed that, but it works when it works. I get there when I can, and I don't I'm not stressing about it if I don't. So that's kind of where I'm at with the exercise. And then I take sporadic walks whenever I can. I'm usually walking about 3 times a day out for I just do like a 15 to 20-minute loop with my dogs and or at least one of my dogs. My one dog is 13 and doesn't always like to go on 3 walks, but I'm trying to get light breaks and moving around during the day. I ground whenever I can, and I'll talk about that in the new adrenal course and how that's really important to build that easy zone water, the exclusion zone water that I was talking about earlier that we haven't really discussed too much on the podcast, but there'll be more information coming on that. So that's kind of where I'm at with exercise. But I'm trying not to overdo it. There were many years where I just way overdid it. I was running a lot. I was doing half marathons. I did a couple marathons. I was always strength training during that time. And most of the time when I'd go running, it'd be like 5 o'clock in the morning. I would meet my neighbor down the street who I'm 99% sure she has adrenal exhaustion also. But that was our time to talk and get together and run and had a lot of fun doing it. But I'm just trying to like be nicer to my body and I'm in the state that I'm at. I shouldn't be running all the time. Um, and so the other thing that I changed was my wearables, meaning like the gadgets that I wear. I'm still wearing my Aura ring. If you are watching on YouTube, you can see that. But I keep it in airplane mode during the day, so I'm not like always looking at my daytime stress and what it's doing. And then all of the things that I've learned with EMF and how that can exacerbate adrenal fatigue also. I've just decided to really try to downplay my EMF, electromagnetic fields as much as possible. You can't see them, they're there. I'm in Wi-Fi a lot of the day. And so I've put my Aura ring on Bluetooth, or I've turned my Bluetooth off on my Aura ring, and I stopped wearing an Apple Watch. I wore an Apple Watch for years. And I always thought, gosh, I'm probably gonna get cancer like on my wrist or something. But the EMF exposure from Apple Watch can be pretty great. And so I decided to just take it off for the EMF exposure. But the other thing I found, like I just obsess about stuff too much. It's just my perfectionist personality. And I was just finding like I wouldn't get, if you guys have Apple Watches, you'll know like it will tell you if you stood every hour. Like you'll get like a little line on your Apple Watch that says you stood up that hour. And I would get all crabby if it wouldn't record, like, so a lot of times when you stand and cook something or you're just standing in one place, it won't record your stand hour. And I'd be like, what? I was standing for 20 minutes and it didn't record my stand hour. And I get like crabby about it, even though I'm the only one who saw it. I'm like, this is ridiculous. This is ridiculous that I'm letting this stupid watch like stress me out. And I'm like, oh, I forgot to start my workout and now it's not recorded on my watch, or it just just constant, and you like text messages coming in on my watch constantly. And whenever I would get a phone call, it's like vibrating on my wrist, and which is good for certain things. Like if I, couldn't you couldn't answer calls, I could at least see texts if I was in meetings or something. But I just decided enough with it. Like, just the watch that I wear now is just a pedometer watch. There's no EMF, there's no Bluetooth. And so I'm just trying that out for a while, getting the wearables off of me. I put my phone in airplane mode most of the day. I turned off my Bluetooth on my computer, so that's a little bit less EMF, and then going out to ground, working outside whenever possible. Those are, I've always loved to be outside in the sun. I was a lifeguard for many years through high school and college. Um, I just I want to be out there whenever possible, especially since there's many months where it's hard to be outside. So I work outside whenever possible, and soak up as much sunlight with being smart, of course. But if you're getting all of these different types of light, your chances of burning are way, way less, because it's like you're priming the skin slowly. And it's like, oh, okay, well, Shanna's outside at 8 and just getting some, different tones of light that aren't so intense. Okay, well, okay. And then UVA comes and says, okay, now I better get Shanna ready for the more intense light, UVB. And so then when you go outside midday and you sit in the sun, you're much less prone to a sunburn. And if you do, you do start to get pink, that's when you get out of the sun, and you just do that for weeks to months, and then your body is used to that, and you don't see those burns happening. So that's kind of where I'm at and why, and what I've been doing, why I've been making the changes. And again, like, you just don't ever know what's going on with people behind the scenes, and what they're dealing with. And I need to do what's best for myself and heal this cortisol pattern that's been wonky for probably 20 years. It's probably been not optimized since I since I had children, or maybe even before that, college. It's like I look at my daughter, and that, her cortisol pattern is crazy because of, living in the dorms, just really dysregulated a lot of her circadian rhythm patterns. And we're just kind of, now getting everything back on track, thankfully. And, now I have two kiddos coming home for the summer. I'm excited about that. My daughter will be a senior in college next year and graduating next May. So this is for sure her last summer home with us. And well, most likely anyway. But I didn't know if she'd be coming home for the summer, and she was contemplating if she was going to stay where she goes to college. So I'm tickled that she's coming home. I love when she's here. My son, I'm actually picking him after this recording. I'm actually picking him up tomorrow out of the dorm. I'm happy to get him out of the dorm and back to, a little bit healthier arrangement. He had a blast, though. He did really well. No big health issues for him this freshman year. But, it's going to be different. Now I have 5 people back in my house and constant distractions. I love it, but, things are going to change again. So you just got to roll with it. and you gotta do what's best for you, and, you get these circadian patterns and this lighting thing down, and things are gonna become much easier. So I'll be talking more and more about that on the podcast as we go, bringing more guest experts on, and then I am working hard to get that course out, but I don't wanna overdo it because I need to get my adrenal stuff back in order, my adrenal and, cortisol, melatonin patterns all back into order and into balance. But I want to teach you all about it as well. So working on that course, and that's kind of where I'm at with everything, with my environment, my eating, my exercise, what's going on. And again, it's hard to come on here and talk about all of this, but I'm always wanting to be transparent and honest with all of you. And I know a lot of you are in my same age group and probably going through the same thing. So we'll go through this together and we'll get healed together, and we will feel our best selves and live our fullest life. So thanks for listening. Hope you learned something new. I'll see you back next week.